is just huge.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The second paper is presented by Nasser Peyghambarian. The title from University of Arizona. The title is Entrepreneurial and Commercial Activities of the Universities, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good afternoon. Thanks for coming. You have heard today and also yesterday about the value that commercialization brings to university research and patents. But there's also a number of issues, serious issues, that may make that process not very effective. So I'm going to tell you a story today about that. This story is going to be painted by my own experience. So, as you've heard, commercialization has many values, including creating this university invention and bring it to the market, commercializing it. There's a lot of excitement that comes out of that. It creates wealth, and it also creates jobs, and makes a lot of students working on the project. So the first step to commercializing the patent and technology is to first choose that technology. Either, as the previous Francis described, you either have your own patent or you license it from somebody and you start your company based on that. But if you're a university professor, you need to first go get a permission from the university to start that company. And so in my case, I went to U of A, University of Arizona, back in 1982. And about 3 years later, I was interested in starting a company. At the time, I was working on switching, optical switching, to sort of augment the electronic switching, electronic transistors. So I went to the provost at the time, and I asked if I could start a company. This was right a few years after by the old act of the 1980, December of 1980, and the universities were not really interested very much in professors taking other responsibilities and starting companies. So the provost told me at the time, hey, you have two options. Either you become a professor or you go and start a company. So I said, okay. I went back to the lab. Fast forward 12, 13 years. In 1997, 98, things have changed. The value of university research commercialization became obvious with success, commercial success at the Bay Area and Boston area and so on. So universities were much more interested in listening to you at that time. So I went back to the provost, now a different provost, and I asked the same question, can I start a company? And this time, no problem at all. A form has to be filled, and then went through the process, went all the way to the Board of Regents, and I got the permission. And this time it was a different topic of optical communication, which was hot at the time. So now the question is getting some funding for it. So the financial model, finances, are very important. If you don't have money, you can't have a company, of course. And some of the entrepreneurs, including myself, when we start, we don't really know how much money we need. And that's very important, because if you raise too much, you get diluted very fast. If you don't raise enough, then you don't have enough money to do things. So finding the right amount is always a question, and we usually go for as much as we can. And then, of course, after you get the funding, you need to put that product on the market as soon as possible. So in my case, I started a company named NP Photonics. I went to angel funding agency, which is called Research Corporation Technologies, and it happened to be in Tucson, so I was able to get about $1 million there, and then started going through venture capitals and got a pretty respectable amount of finances going. At the time, in those days, if you are remembering those days, it was so easy to get money for your ideas. Of course, it's no longer the case. That was only one time in a lifetime that you can see things like that happen. But it started as a good process. I had several offers and several term sheets that I could choose between them. So my 5-member company became a $60 million after-money valuation, which was, of course, all on the paper. There was no real value except for the money that you had. So we actually, our product was supposed to be credit card size amplifiers for the telecom. At the time, as I said, telecom was very hot, and this was one of the smallest amplifiers. Usually, because of a patent that we had, usually amplifiers are several meters. In this case, it was just about a couple of centimeters for the amplifier. You get a lot of gain out of it. The problem was that just a few months later, the telecom market crashed in 2001. And we had to reinvent ourselves overnight to a different type of a company, completely leave the telecom and made the amplifiers, and the lasers are not very much different. There are some differences, of course. So we became all of a sudden a laser company. And that's what the venture capitals usually tell you. They say, well, invest on people, not on ideas, because the ideas may not turn out to be good. So talking about funding, angel funding, of course, is very important. Venture capital, there are pros and cons. The next slide, I'm going to discuss it a bit more. There's another model, is a customer funding, which means that you go to a customer that needs the product that you want to make, and you get funding from them. That's very interesting because you don't lose any of the shares, or you don't get diluted very much. But the problem is that if the company loses interest, then you pretty much go. Or if your agreement with them is such that you can't work with other companies, then the company usually doesn't last very long. And of course, SBIR, STTR financing is important, but they usually don't make you rich. So on the venture capitals, they come in with a lot of money, a lot of cash comes in, and bring the company on its feet very, very rapidly. They also help you with hiring, especially on the higher levels like CTOs, Chief Technical Officer, or CFOs, or COOs, and all of those things. But the problem is the dilution. I started at 100%. In about 2-3 years later, I was less than 5% ownership. So you pretty much are out. They also take control of it. Usually the first step, the VCs follow a book. The first act is to get rid of the founder. And that happens usually very quickly. In my case, of course, you have to have value for the company so that they can keep you around. It's no longer your baby. So in my case, it lasted until 2012 or 11, about 15 years later. And I was the chairman of the board. I resigned because the new CEO that came in, we had a difference in opinion of which direction the company should go, because the company never made any money, even though we spent millions of dollars. It was never cash positive. So NP Photonics, which started as with my initials, actually I refer to it as no profit company. So I left, and I'll tell you more about the outcome of that later in a couple of minutes. So what are the bad things? Conflict of interest. There's always conflict, and these conflicts are real. There's financial conflict. There's also, if you use students or postdocs to work in the company, that creates a lot of conflict. equipment use. At the beginning, we didn't have any equipment, so I had to use the equipment that the university had, my own equipment, but I paid for it, so it was okay. But this creates a lot of issues, actually. There's also conflict of commitment. If your time is being spent on something other than research or teaching or committee, then you have a commitment, you have a conflict, and this has to be taken care of. There are ways to manage that conflict, and that's what they usually call these manageable conflict of interest and commitment. So in my case, for example, they put together a conflict of interest committee that was managing the whole program, but still you have to go through a lot of interviews, a lot of forms to be filed, and so there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to make that conflict manageable. These issues comes up, and they're very encumbersome and make the process very slow. So, and sometimes actually the units, like the research is usually being done under the Vice President of Research, but universities now have learned that commercialization is a good deal, so they have Office of Technology Transfer that sometimes are not reporting to the same vice president, so there are two different organizations reporting to the president, and sometimes the goals and the ideas that they have are not in line. They conflict. One side pushes for company generation, the other side, hey, we have conflict, we have to manage it. So those become very encumbersome after a while, and the question comes up, does it really worth it? And so that's my final thought on this. It's a lot of hard work to start a company. A lot of times it doesn't really get anywhere. The exit strategies for small companies, startup companies, many of them, they go down without making any money. Many of them, there's a lot of work, doesn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And there's not much time left for your family. You're travel, you're doing a lot of things. But at the same time, it creates a lot of excitement. It's a lot of energy that comes to your research and to the company. And there are also possibilities, even though they are rare, there are millionaires and multimillionaires that comes out of that process. So to finish up my story on NP Photonics, what I predicted turned out to be true. The area that they wanted to go, they didn't have any business to go to that area, and they got sued. So the company, the board of directors basically decided that they're going to sell the company. So I went back, bought all the shares, and ran it since 2013. And it has been a successful company that has been making money. So the idea that professors cannot run the company is not always true. And one last comment. I came in this country 41 years ago as a student with 2 luggage, one full of clothes and the other one full of books. If there was a travel ban at the time, I would have never been here.
You know, it's interesting, the last 2 presentations was juxtaposition really well. So you talked about one invention in one company, or maybe multiple inventions in one company for a long period of time. And the previous speaker spoke about multiple companies, multiple inventions. And it's very similar to being an entrepreneur or an investor, which I've been both of. If you're an investor, you're taking many bets. If you're an entrepreneur, you take one bet for some period of time. And I'm curious, you know, which model do you think is better? Should you have stepped out of NP, even though it were your initials, back in 2001 and gone on to invent something else in a new company, or should you have stuck with this till 2012?
Well, I actually stepped out and started another company. And this one, because of the fact that I had conflict with NP, it was a completely different ideas and basically augmented reality type of products. And that company made that product and was sold to a much larger company just about last year. So, but I learned from my experience at NP Photonics that it's not VC money, VC financing is great. It's something that you have to consider. But for my second company, I didn't want to go after VC funding because it was just, you just lose control so rapidly that it doesn't make any sense, I think. It's not your company, basically. As soon as you get the VC money, somebody else runs it, you have no control. So in the second company, I used my own funding, and I got customer funding, as I was mentioning in one of my financial models, and it was okay. That worked out rather well. So it doesn't always work that well, but SBIR and STTR does help in those cases because it allows you to, as long as those topics are related to the product that you're making, it's actually a good thing. That helped me in that process. So yeah, it's no clear answer to your question. I think there's both, depending on the case-by-case basis. Sometimes it's good to start on one idea, and sometimes it's, you also create a lot of other ideas while you're working on that idea. So it's not always just one patent. It becomes like 30 patents over the period of 15 years.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Kurt Becker from New York University, co-chairing this session, and I'm calling on Jennifer West to tell us how to involve STEM students in the innovative process.